Welcome to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN. Now, here's your hosts, Gary Kelley and Brad Avergon.
Good morning and welcome to All Things Real Estate on 50,000 watt WCRN. I'm sorry, I had a flashback to my youth. I'm Gary Kelley. I'm with Lamakia Realty, and I am joined by
Brad Avergon with Fairway Independent Mortgage.
Fairway Mortgage.
Yes, sir.
Every time I hear that, I think of a guy out on the golf course.
Slicing a hole in one.
Have you been there long enough to have a sense of where the name Fairway came from?
You know, I heard it in my massive training and I forgot the answer to that question.
All right. Well,
I didn't know there was going to be a quiz, Gary. I didn't know there was going to be a quiz.
I'm with Lamakia Realty, and needless to say, Anthony Lamakia had something to say about the name of the company. I was actually interviewed on an Upton cable station. The woman that was doing the interview, delightful lady, could not say Lamakia. It had to be Lamakia, like a moccasin. And it ended up being spelled that way. I feel sorry for her. You know, Anthony, his entire life, I've had the whole thing of how many E's in my last name. Turns out Kelly is the same name, no matter how many E's, it's just what side of the church, which church you went to back in the old country.
I did not know that.
See, Brad, let's just end the show right here. So, Brad, we want to talk today about selling a home in a divorce situation. And what's occurred to me as I've got this brochure that we put together some time ago that talks about selling a home fast in a divorce, the steps are rather the same, whether you're selling your home quickly in a divorce or whether you are selling your home quickly in general. Or I was talking to someone last night whose father passed away, and we were talking about the steps to get her home, her father's home, on the market. And so, yeah, it's not every situation is different, but I think it's worth spending some time on. Sue and I have been working with some clients that are divorcing, sadly, and it just brings the whole thing to the surface. Decision making is far more complicated in a divorce than when they're happily sitting at the kitchen table discussing things.
Absolutely. So,
Brad, you've worked with divorcing clients before. What advice would you give them?
Well, the first advice is it's actually twofold. In my world, in the mortgage world, you're either married or you're not married. And so there gets to be some confusion if people are separated, because in the divorce world, you can have this legal separation, but they're not legally divorced yet.
Yeah.
So the challenge with that is it's hard to kind of, once that happens, once the divorce process begins, typically assets are frozen and you can't really move forward, you can't move backwards. So when people are thinking, quote unquote, thinking about a divorce, if they know that they're going to be selling the real estate and it is an amicable situation where they both agree it's going to be sold and they can kind of get along, it's not a bad idea to go ahead and do that early on. The other part, because what it does is, number one, it releases both parties from that mortgage obligation, and it frees up a lot of cash, and so it makes it easier if you're trying to show them, each one of them a home that they can go live and buy somewhere else. It changes things a little bit there. The other thing is that if one party is going to buy the other party out, we can do that before they're legally divorced. And so what it does is, let's assume that the wife is going to stay in the family home, and she's going to buy the husband out. We can set that up in the form of a refinance. He gets the equity, gets freed up, and can go buy another property. He's no longer responsible for that mortgage, and she's set and can move forward. And that can all be done while they're married. If they're going to go through the process and are committed, and let's say it's not amicable and they have to get through that, then it's a different story. We actually have to have the divorce agreement in order to figure out what the obligations are going to be for either or both parties on it. And if one of the parties is going to be relying on child support or alimony as an income source to qualify for that new mortgage, they have to have been in receipt of it for at least 6 months prior, as of the divorce agreement. So basically what that means is you can't say, okay, we're going to sell the house, I'm going to go out and buy a new property if you rely on that income. We need to have that divorce agreement first, let them stay in the house typically for that 6-month period or rent somewhere, and then they can qualify for that mortgage using that child support or alimony income.
It's a tough situation no matter what they do. And I think that the divorce itself brings emotions up, and having to decide what the strategy is to move forward obviously can also bring more emotions. And so it supercharges an already charged situation.
It does indeed. It does indeed. And I think that, having those conversations early on with folks like you and folks like me, and oftentimes, I don't know about you, I don't want to speak for you, but in my world, I'm talking to one of the two parties. I don't usually have both parties on the phone. I have one of the two, and the other one is that party is transferring that information or relaying that information to the other party. So sometimes things can get lost a little bit, but it's a sensitive, you're definitely walking on eggshells with those types of situations. And each one of them is different, depending on what's going on, what sort of pressure is there, what the timing of it is. But you're right. It's a very emotional transaction.
We try to make sure that we absolutely give the same information to both parties. And so our typical approach would be, let's all hop on a call. Let's do a Zoom call. Let's get together around the kitchen table, whatever it is. And what we find is there are instances where those people cannot be in the same space anymore, whether it's the virtual space or the physical space. And so what we try to do is give each the same information, give an indication. Typically we're looking for a decision of some type. And we try to say, okay, this is what Paul thought. What do you think, Patty? And that kind of thing, and try to work to a consensus that way, and then inform the other one of what the decision is.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I do find myself, when both parties are involved, having a similar type of a situation where I'm dealing with one party on the phone and then I'm relaying that same information to the other. The other part is that you need mutual cooperation. If, you need, in my world, I need financial documents. And so if one party wants to do this and the other party's not on that same page, it can be really challenging to try to get there. And having those conversations, I think, early on and say, okay, this is what we think. Are we all in agreement that this is what you want to do, and is everybody willing to cooperate to that end? I think it's probably more important than anything else, right? Because if you've got people pulling in different directions, it's going to really create quite a challenge.
Well, I think the same thing is true if you're not divorced and you're debating what to do with the house. Okay, it really is a similar process. What do you want to do with the home? Do you want to keep it? Do you want to pass it on to the kids? Do you want to put it in a trust? A zillion different things you can do with the house. But the bottom line, the question that I ask people is, when it's all said and done, do you still want to have an ownership interest in the home? And if the answer is no, then that goes down one path. If the answer is yes, then it becomes a different kind of conversation.
Agreed.
We then get into, what's the valuation on a house? And, as realtors, we'll do something called a comparable market analysis, a CMA. Okay, that's our attempt to say, based on what we see selling in your neighborhood or the area, this is where we think the house sits from a price perspective or from a value perspective. And what often happens is people are swayed by, well, the house down the street sold for this. Well, okay, the house down the street did sell for that, but the house down the street was 5 bedrooms and you've got 3. So it's a bigger house. The other thing I find, and I respect attorneys, and I believe that when you need an attorney, it's good to have one on your side. But often in these situations, the attorneys will weigh in with that, presence of I'm the attorney. And when they say, you didn't value that house correctly, it's like, okay, what did you look at? Well, I looked it up on Zillow. Don't let my real estate license confuse you with a Zillow Z estimate. That's my view.
Right. No, I couldn't agree with that more. And, it's interesting. Every once in a while I will have, because I do network with some divorce attorneys as well. And every once in a while I'll have one reach out and say, hey, I need a valuation on this house. We need an appraisal because, if they're acting as a mediator, they need something very, very official. And from an unbiased party. So I'll give a name of an appraiser out. But if and when those people come back to do either an equity buyout or whatever of that same property, most often that's not going to be that same appraiser that's going to go out. And so there could be a difference in the valuation. Even when you go out with a CMA, the odds of that appraiser coming in at that exact value, I don't know. There could be some differentiation. And so
Hey,
if it
Brad,
is an equity buyout.
hold that thought.
Okay.
You got to pay some bills. Ted's yelling. How does someone reach you?
Best way to reach me is via my cell, which is 978-375-5531, or via email at brad.avergon@fairwaymc.com. And Gary, how do they reach you?
I'm Gary Kelley, and I can be reached at 508-733-6005 or Gary@movewithgary.com. Brad, we'll pause here and then we will come back and finish the show.
Sounds great. See you on the flip side, Gary.
You've been listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN.